All right, so let's move on to the undercard of this event, and let's start with the co-main event: Isaac Cruz against Jose Valenzuela. Isaac Cruz has made a name for himself over the last few years as the guy that was really competitive against Gervonta Davis in 2021. Earlier this year, he moves up to 140 pounds. He has a great performance against Rolly Romero, though you can probably argue that that fight has much to do with the weaknesses of Rolly Romero as it did the strengths of Isaac Cruz. He comes into this fight against Valenzuela, who was also moving up to 140 for the first time. Valenzuela had been training for, I believe, a rematch against Edwin De Los Santos at 135. He gets the call, like most guys do. Hey, you want this fight? A lot of money in it. He says, yes, I'll take it. And he goes out and he had the best performance of his pro career. I mean, Valenzuela, I know the crowd was booing after the decision was announced for Valenzuela. I don't get it. Like, I know there are a lot of Isaac Cruz fans that they were in the stands that night, but you can't watch that fight and think it was anything else but a clean win for Jose Valenzuela. That's how I saw it, Keith. How did you see it?
Yeah, I thought Valenzuela won as well. He boxed the way that he had to box. I mean, he's not going to stand there and just let Isaac Cruz come running at him and knock him out. I mean, that's what Rolly Romero did, right? So it didn't turn out well for Rolly. He should have fought Ryan Garcia when he had the opportunity, as it turns out. But Isaac Cruz basically knows how to fight one way. And if you are able to figure that out and combat that, and I thought, honestly, Jose Valenzuela might have done that better than Gervonta Davis did. I thought Gervonta Davis won that fight. We were there that night. I thought it was a competitive fight and good for Isaac Cruz in that he made a name for himself against, the top, one of the biggest boxing stars there are. But I didn't think he beat Tank Davis. I just thought that he gave him a competitive fight. And like you said, he also took a fight on short notice when everything happened with Rolly Romero in Vegas. They needed an opponent on barely a month's notice, and he capitalized on his opportunity. Yeah, he lost, but he got some paydays out of it. He goes on to win a 140-pound title, like you said. But he only knows how to fight one way. And I was there. I forgot how long ago now it was. Chris, was 3-4 years ago. Maybe I covered a Showbox card in Philadelphia where, you could argue that he lost to Thomas Matisse. And, Thomas Matisse is not on the level of Gervonta Davis or even Jose Valenzuela. And that was a very competitive fight. So my point is that Isaac Cruz he can punch and he's a fan-friendly fighter and he's developed a fan following especially among Mexicans and Mexican-American fans. There's no denying any of that, but he lost last night. And to Jose Valenzuela's credit, Jose Valenzuela, also born in Mexico, of course, lives outside of Seattle now, but I was happy for him in the sense that, that kid comes to fight, man. And he came and banged it out with Edwin De Los Santos and thought that he was going to knock De Los Santos out. And then he gets knocked out. And that, he, at that point, you remember, Chris, he was highly regarded, Valenzuela. He was young. He was a puncher. He had the Mexican following starting to develop and everything. This was during the pandemic. So, it was kind of a weird situation fan wise, but they were very high on him. And then he gets knocked out by De Los Santos and then he comes back and I'm not sure that first fight with Chris Colbert should have gone the way that it went.
Yeah.
Regardless, he comes back and redeems himself emphatically in the rematch and knocks Chris Colbert out. And that's how he got this fight. So he's a taller kid. So really going from 135 to 140, I don't think is all that much of a difference for him. He's pretty much taller than Isaac Cruz. I mean, who isn't, I guess. But, he made the most of his opportunity, changed his life last night. And that's what he's capable of doing. And he did it on the biggest stage where a lot of people were watching. Maybe we'll do a rematch, who knows? But I think people would. Yeah, Isaac Cruz is going to get more opportunities. He's a fan-friendly fighter, and he's a young guy himself. It's not like he's going to be out of the mix now because of this loss. But Valenzuela changed his life last night, and kudos to him for seizing that opportunity when he did.
I mean, it was awesome to see Valenzuela get that win because spending time with him during fight week, you learn more and more about his story. Born in Mexico, moving up to that Washington area, and then, making the decision recently to come to Southern California and train with Robert Garcia and to be proactive with your career. Like, he thought his career was stalling training up in Washington, comes down to Southern California, works out with Robert, gets in that gym. So many good fighters there, lots of good sparring. And you can certainly, and we talked about this on the broadcast, you can make the argument that sparring made a huge difference. Like, he was sparring with, Oscar Duarte, who's a big-time pressure fighter who probably gave him great rounds. Robert Garcia told me, and he didn't remember the name of the kid, but it was like an amateur from Texas that they sparred with a bunch of rounds. And this kid was just exactly like Isaac Cruz, small, pure pressure, physical, and
Mhm.
that prepared him. Like, I was watching those early rounds, and I'm like, all right, he looks pretty good, but there's no way he can do this for 12. Like, he can't keep sticking and moving and throwing combinations. He can't stay out of the way of these big shots. Not only did he mostly stay out of the way of those big shots, when he did get hit with one, they didn't really hurt him. Like, took one left hand in like the
Yeah.
seventh round, and he kind of just shook it off and said, I'm good with this. So, good for Valenzuela. Like, I mean, I'm happy for guys like that. The Chris Colbert win was big for him. Now he's got a title at 140. Now he's got a chance to make some real money, in this division, whether it's against Cruz or otherwise. And now with Isaac Cruz, like, does he stay at 140? Does he go back to 135? Like, he's a short guy. He moved up to 140 really for that opportunity to fight Rolly
Right.
Romero. I don't know what the future. Like, you're right. He is going to get another shot very quickly. Not only is he fan friendly, but you can tell he sells tickets. Like, you remember that fight he had with Romero. Like, in that building, he was the co-main event.
Yeah.
He might as well have been the main event. Like, he was selling all the tickets
Mhm.
to that fight, and he did the same thing in LA. So, he'll be back, but at what weight, and does he need to make changes? Like, he's very one-dimensional. Like, there's no jabs to his game. It's just bull in a china shop, coming right at you, being physical. And you've seen, right? Like, you can outbox a fighter like that. You can frustrate a fighter like that. If Isaac Cruz wants to be championship level every single fight, he's going to have to make some changes.
Yeah, he seems like someone who's just going to continue fighting the way that he fights, Chris. You're right. I mean, you're 1,000% right. But he believes in his chin so much, and in some cases believes in the top of his head so much, because that's where he oftentimes gets hit. And everyone comes away from him fighting him saying how hard his head is. So he feels like he can just plow forward like that, eventually wear someone down and catch them with the type of shot that knocked out Rolly Romero, or several shots that knocked out Rolly Romero, because he has that type of power. There's no doubt about it. So I don't know that he's going to change his. He should probably, to make himself more dimensional than he is, but I don't think he's going to change much. But maybe what that fight was about a little bit last night, Chris, was that in moving up, Jose Valenzuela showed that 140 pounds is the better weight for him because, as you mentioned, he took a shot much better at 140 pounds. So not squeezing his frame, which about 5'10" or so, right? He's a
Yeah,
pretty
he's a tall guy. He's a
yeah.
big kid for
Yeah.
135, even big for
Right.
140.
So that's the thing, Chris. You know how it is when you squeeze down to 135 because you're trying to take advantage of the size and the ring and all that kind of stuff when you fight other lightweights. 140 is probably a more suitable weight for him, whereas with Isaac Cruz, 135 is a better weight for him because he can still make that weight. And like you said, he only moved up to 140 to take that opportunity. And who would blame anyone for that? I mean, he made a lot of money, and he turned out to be the right decision because he knocked Rolly out. So maybe he goes back to 135, and obviously Valenzuela will stay at 140 because he's in the mix for big fights now, like for against other champions. And as you mentioned, Chris, being in that Robert Garcia Boxing Academy, not only you're getting great sparring, but you see a lot of these high level guys and how they work. That's the thing. Maybe if your work ethic is lacking a little bit, which I had heard about Valenzuela a little, like he maybe got a little too content and he wasn't putting in the work all the time up in at the gym with the Benavides in the Seattle area. Not that he wasn't sparring and stuff, but he just wasn't taking it quite as seriously as he should have. Now you get yourself around guys like Virgil Ortiz and Jose Ramirez and all the other fighters that Robert has in his gym, and you see how they go about their business on a daily basis. That's bound to rub off on you. And maybe in this case, that's part of what happened, that he realized what it would take to become a real championship caliber fighter. Whatever happened, it worked.
Yeah, it was an impressive performance. And my advice for Jose Valenzuela is to stay close to Eddie Hearn and let him know that your passport is ready for travel. Like, they're probably going to do a Liam Paro fight in Australia at some point. And
there you go.
And look, Valenzuela doesn't really have a fan base in the U.S. Paro doesn't have a fan base in the U.S. He should be like a miniature Devin Haney and say, look, I will, give me 7 figures to go over and fight Liam Paro in a unification fight in Australia. I will take that fight. Like, that to me is a smart fight because then you'd have one guy with 2 belts. It's not a great weight class right now with, Devin Haney out of it, Ryan Garcia never going to be in it. Like, I think consolidating those belts is your best chance to make some big paydays, and I think that's a good chance for Valenzuela. That's a good fight for him. Like, Paro's a good fighter, but he's not infallible. I think that's a great fight for the boxing fans, like Valenzuela against Liam Paro. I like that fight if he can make that happen.